We conclude the session 6 with Nobuo Akiyama's talk and a discussion that can, as we had been very short with your talk, etc., come back to some of the previous talks. And then I will be handing over to Maggie Archer for the next session, which, as you've seen by the topics of it, belongs rather much into the discussion areas of the session 6 also. We'll have a concluding discussion afterwards. And of course, having had lots of time during lunch, I expect that you are taking your time to study the zero draft of the concluding statement already, so we can have a very fruitful discussion afterwards. So, Nobu, yes, your turn.
Thank you very much for introduction, and I also thank you for inviting me to this very stimulating the workshop. In fact, I'm not a scientist, and I was told by my ex-supervisor at my college saying that the political science is the least scientific science in the world, and so I'm afraid my talk is much less scientific as a student of international relations, and also I have to confess I'm an amateur in the AI, but more I'm focused on the nuclear issues. So I hope you could bear with me on my rather maybe ignorant presentation on the relationship between the AI and the nuclear deterrence. And I would like to make another disclaimer. I spent 6 years in Hiroshima, and I'm the one who really hopes the world without nuclear weapons. And I've been keep on thinking to how much the AI would help to achieve the objective of a world without nuclear weapons, or how much AI may become a stumbling block to achieve that goal. So with this, I would like to start my presentation. But I think after lunch, you are probably full and sleepy. So before you fall asleep, I would like to start with my conclusion. My presentation is about the list of questions that I would like to throw to the experts on the AI. And so despite of these concerns or questions I raise, probably the adoption of AI into the nuclear domain would advance. The second, these concerns, including irrationality of human decisions, raised here are not uniquely associated with AI in the nuclear domain. And third, with the introduction of the AI in intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and decision-making process in the nuclear domain, these concerns may take more acute shape. I mean, the concerns means the old questions associated with the nuclear deterrence may take more acute shape. Okay. Then, fourth, the goal of nuclear deterrence is not so simple as winning a battlefield fight or destroying the target, but rather it must incorporate various values such as rights, freedom, humanitarian concerns, and other in order to achieve political objectives. And fifth, the AI gives us a chance to face these old hard questions on nuclear deterrence itself. So if we are able to face them, AI can be the one to save the humanity. But if we fail to tackle these hard questions, the AI may bring us to the edge of nuclear winter. So with this sense of kind of urgency to deal with the relationship between AI and nuclear deterrence, I would like to proceed my presentation. So the key questions are, first, would AI reinforce nuclear deterrence and strategic stability or undermine them? So whether the AI would bring some instability to the nuclear relationship. So that's question one. And question two is, would AI promote nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation? So I would like to talk a little bit on the potential way forward in promoting nuclear disarmament, but I think mostly my presentations are kind of more concerns over the optimism about nuclear disarmament. And I would like to touch upon three different dimensions of the questions. One is AI as a decision support system, and second, AI as an enhancer of the capability in ISR, and third is AI as a complicating factor of conventional nuclear threshold. So before talking about problems, I would like to just talk a little bit about the essence of nuclear deterrence. I think most of you are not so much familiar with the logic of nuclear deterrence. So I just would like to lay out a couple of basics. So deterrence is the use of retaliatory threats to dissuade adversary from attacking oneself or one's allies. So, but in other words, we are trying to, through nuclear deterrence, the states will try to win or gain something without actually using nuclear weapons. So if nuclear weapons are used, it's a failure of deterrence. The second, the nuclear deterrence is the complicating of adversary's strategic calculus. So by making the strategic calculation more complicated, then the states may try to refrain adversary's use of force against yourself. So that means that deterrence is not the only goal, nor the winning of war. The strategic game over a nuclear weapon is more like a political game beyond the military one. And the deterrence should be a multidimensional. Beyond the military posture and pressure, it requires greater extent, sophisticated skill of political communication and crisis management. And then if deterrence would be to succeed, then there must be a good balance between resolve and restraint. So we have to send a strong message of resolve and a message to use the force as corresponding to such a resolve if the other side or adversary is determined to do so. But then it required the compromise and carefully avoid the total humiliation of adversary, which may drive the adversary into desperate action, which is the use of force. So coming back to the basics, that we have to win the game without actually using nuclear weapons, while we have to force the other side to refrain from using force. So then the question is, what is AI to nuclear deterrence? So what AI systems are good at? I think we have discussed already. So mostly I'm thinking of narrow AI, although I'm interested in when the general AI is developed and what would be the implication. But at this moment, what narrow AIs are good at are like data classification and anomaly detection, and detecting sort of abnormal behavior, such as fraudulent financial transactions, or new malware, or monitor large data streams at scale in real time, and predictions and optimization of performance of complex systems and tasks. So with these characters, I think AI optimizes performance to achieve a goal provided. And then current AI systems may still have a limitation in performing when they are operated outside the context for which they are designed to work, and are transferring their learning from one goal to another. So that means I think there is a limitation in application of AI into the nuclear deterrence. But still, there are ways that AI would be adapted or employed in a couple of areas. And one of them is, of course, supporting decision making. So, but before talking about the relationship between AI and the decision making in nuclear deterrence, we have to also address the problem of the irrationality of the human beings. Well, in fact, the logic of nuclear deterrence is constructed on the assumption of human rationality. But however, the actual human behavior is not necessarily rational. And they tend to take more risks to defend something and be more cautious in newly gaining something, even though they are of equal values. So even though they try to gain or to defend the same amount of values, the people's attitude are different depending on the phase they are facing. And then a second feature of irrationality is like leaders tend to be overly optimistic about their ability to control the situation, the crisis. And that the examples of history shows. In case of Japanese invasion into Asia and the war against the United States, I think the leaders understood the risk of engaging in war with the United States, but they thought they are able to finish the war in half a year or so, which was not the case. And of course, other examples shows that leaders are overly optimistic about situation control. And third, the preference of the human is not constant, and it changes subject to the environment. So that means the strategic goals in nuclear deterrence is not a constant goal, but it's more about moving target to be achieved. And fourth, I think in the last session we talked a little bit about this, that the emotions, particularly fears of the people, may be one of the important elements of nuclear decision making. And probably this is very much irrational and undefinable and unknowable feature or the factors that may shape the psyche of decision makers at the time of a crisis in particular. So another concern or question about the human decision making is that question, it's how to incorporate unmeasurable values. As I mentioned, the nuclear deterrence is a multi-dimensional game incorporating very different types of values, including political, ethical, and others. And most of them are rather unmeasurable. And then, as I said, the objectives of the nuclear deterrence is moving target. So it's so difficult to clearly identify what be pursued, what kind of a goal is pursued by the decision makers in nuclear deterrence. So here, AI is a super rational entity, while the human is rather irrational entity. There is a dilemma between these two different types of the way of thinking or the structure of thinking. If AI is incorporated into as a kind of a supporting system for decision making, what would happen? One feature of one possibility is that we have a much deep fog of war by AI. So that means there is a growing uncertainty in adversaries' intention, preference, and where we don't know where they draw a red line for the military actions. And that's the nature of the strategic ambiguity in the nuclear deterrence. But then also, as I said, there is no absolute truth or really fixed the goal to be achieved by nuclear deterrence. So there is no right answer to that. And maybe we also playing rather long and medium and long-term strategic games instead of a one-shot, the tactical battlefield battle. So that's kind of a nature of nuclear deterrence. And on top of that, AI's capability and reliability maybe add more uncertainties. And then if AI is incorporated into the decision-making structure, then maybe mutual suspicions between adversaries will be increased. And then one side may be tempted to destroy the targets first, then in order to avoid the more risks of being destroyed. And second, about the nature of AI as a black box. So when decision makers do not know the process within AI of how to arrive to the certain conclusion, are they convinced to follow the advice of AI? Maybe if I were a decision maker, probably I have a rather reluctance to do so. And if we don't know how the conclusion is drawn, then it's really difficult in reviewing whether the conclusion AI made is really correct or not. So difficult in reviewing the process. And third, because of the lack of traceability, it may affect the sense of ownership by decision makers in their policy decisions. So then the question is, can decision makers be responsible for a result of the policy without having a sense of ownership, accountability, and responsibility? But on the other hand, there are some maybe bright side of the employment of AI in the nuclear deterrence and nuclear domain. That is the improvement of ISR capabilities. So combined with the sensing, satellite, and data processing technology, AI will significantly improve the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities. So the possible positive impact of that are, first, it improves the credibility of deterrence, and it will be a constraint against unintended or unnecessary escalations or the use of nuclear weapons. Second, it serves the improvement of verification and inspection capabilities, and that serves the purpose of arms control and non-proliferation. So it eventually leads into the threat reduction and confidence building between nuclear armed states, and eventually that the chance to reduce the nuclear weapons. And the third, the faster and more accurate assessment situation awareness allows decision makers to take more time for assess and choose options. But on the other hand, there are some possible negative impacts, and particularly in case that one side introduces the AI into the ISR, the other side is not. In such a asymmetrical development may pose more a critical question. And so the one is contrary to what I have said earlier, there will be more pressure for faster decision making under the concerns and adversary superiority in ISR, and therefore there will be less time for reviewing and scrutinizing data provided by the AI. The second, so with this, the decision makers may be trapped into the situation of use it or lose it. And so that's more risk for the catastrophic consequence. And third, before getting into the crisis situation, people tend to, decision makers may be tempted to deploy incomplete and unsafe AI system, which may cause more bugs and troubles in providing assessment and advices. And another concern about the introduction of AI into the ISR, possibly, or the other AI technology in general, is the nuclear conventional entanglement. That is, application of AI into the conventional weapon systems, including more precise targeting and the swarm technology, affects the nuclear deterrence. Because, for example, the non-nuclear strategic weapons such as precision-guided missiles, supersonic weapons, which are enhanced by AI, would be a complicating factor for strategic calculations. They may reduce the role of nuclear weapons, which could be substituted by these non-nuclear strategic weapons, but
The problem is these weapons may induce the other side to use nuclear weapons if they are not able to or capable of introducing such a sophisticated weapon systems. And then, as we have listened to, that we have more sophisticated cyber warfare, and these are kind of strong incentives of the one side which have not introduced AI to rely more on the nuclear capabilities. So then finally, agenda for nuclear ethics in AI era. One, as an amateur of AI, I've been keep on asking myself and others whether AI is really autonomous. Autonomous means, in a more general terms, whether AI can set a goal and AI can adapt itself to the changing strategic environment by itself. In fact, AI is an adaptive and heterogeneous systems, and policymakers need to provide AI with objectives and goals in a way that AI can read and operate. So here is a manipulation of the concept and the goals. So here it's already a kind of a trouble in identifying and finding appropriate goals and missions for the AI, and there may be potential for discrepancies between what policymakers want to achieve and what AI can provide as an assistance in the decision making. And the second, the accountability and the responsibility questions. So can decision makers be convinced in taking responsibility in and holding accountability for decisions guided by misinformation of AI if AI shorten the time for decision making and if there is no possibility to provide a time for the reviewing the AI decision. So how can we solve this problem? And again, I also would like to emphasize the fear of decision makers in making mistake and false judgment or bringing a catastrophic consequence to the human being. Then how can we overcome at the same time, because of the lack of information, because of fear of such mistakes, that policymakers, contrary to what they would think, they may rely more on AI. So this kind of what's a dilemma would be happening on the decision maker's psyche. And finally, is it appropriate to say like this? The best solutions provided by AI, even if it is more rational, may not be so legitimate as it should be. It must be the human who decide whether the solution should be implemented. It's easy to say, the human being should be intervening in decision making, but if AI is able to provide better, accurate assessment, then how can we best utilize it? That's maybe a way that we have to think about this question. Thank you.
Thank you very much.